Welcome to Fantasy Football Today Dynasty. I am your host, Heath Cummings, joined today by Jamie Eisenberg, Dan Schneier. We've got our first 2024 mock draft, and I cannot wait. Jamie, it's been a long time since you've been here. I think we did a mock draft the last time you were here. What's going on?
It's good to be here. I appreciate you having me. Not that we don't talk in other places, but it's fun to be on your show, and you've done a great job with it all season long. So I don't think I was on it all during the year, but certainly paid attention to it, and you had some fantastic guests, and again, just did a great job kicking butt. And I know you'll do it again this offseason, certainly next year as well.
A bad job hosting by me. It's Jamie's pick, and I throw him a question. Dan's up next. So, Dan, I'm going to go ahead and ask you. You just made a Jalen Hurts trade. Are you going to get to draft Jalen Hurts with the 5th overall pick? What did you give up for Jalen Hurts?
Yeah, in Baked Burger Dynasty League, where I tanked year one, I made a trade the opposite direction now, and I traded a first-round pick, 2 second-round picks, a third-round pick, and Rashad Bateman for Jalen Hurts in our Baked Burger SuperFlex Dynasty. So now I'm going the opposite route, Heath. I have Jalen Hurts, Josh Allen, Jahmyr Gibbs, Breece Hall, and James Cook as my core, with Jaden Reed and a few other nice pieces at receiver. Not so nice, Jaden Reed, Jackson Smith and Jigba, and Zay Flowers, but I'm open for business with the rest of these picks now. I'm looking to win now with Jalen Hurts and Josh Allen.
You're looking to pick now because you're on the clock with about 45 seconds left. The first 4 picks in our mock draft. Bradley Stadler takes Josh Allen number 1 overall. I think that's probably the easiest pick. We've got Corey Spalla with Patrick Mahomes. Dave Richard takes Jalen Hurts. Jamie, you took Lamar Jackson, and I don't know who you would have chosen. One of the questions I was going to ask, this guy hasn't been taken yet. One of the questions I was going to ask is, did CJ Stroud pass Jalen Hurts in Dynasty this weekend? Very, very different performances from these two quarterbacks.
Definitely different performances. I don't think so yet, but he certainly has closed the gap. He's closed the gap on Lamar. He's closed the gap on Burrow, who Dan took. There's a lot to love about what CJ Stroud has done, and hopefully will continue to do. But I think he's still got a little bit to go to get past those quarterbacks in my mind.
I debated going with Stroud here over Burrow. It was very close for me. And it's an interesting pick. I feel like if you go Stroud, it's a little bit more of a long-term pick, maybe. But what's the difference right now? I'm trying to get let's see where we're at with Joe Burrow. Yeah, 27 versus CJ Stroud's going to be 22. So it's a little bit more of a long-term pick, I think. But I'll go for the win now pick with Burrow.
Well, that's I think is the question. I've got Stroud ahead of Burrow. I had it Allen, Hurts, Stroud, Mahomes,
okay.
And then Jackson right in there with them. But I struggle with what he just did as a rookie. He didn't show us the upside that all these other guys have shown us, obviously, but it was his rookie season. A lot of these guys were bad as rookies. And we've seen Joe Burrow exclusively pretty much with Jamar Chase and T. Higgins. What if T. Higgins is gone this year and it's just Joe Burrow with Jamar Chase, right, and it's CJ Stroud with Tank Dell and Nico Collins in year 2 getting even better? I think he's a guy who could rise and continue rising at the quarterback position. It would not be that big of a surprise. We had our first non-quarterback taken. Adam Azer takes Justin Jefferson right after Sam Waldorf takes CJ Stroud. So I think I'm going to keep that non-QB run going. I will take Jamar Chase here. I actually have Jamie Chase just ahead of Jefferson in my dynasty rankings right now. These guys have gone back and forth. They're the clear 1 and 2. There's not been a different 1 and 2 for a long time amongst non-quarterbacks. The only reason right now that Chase is ahead is because I don't know who Jefferson quarterback is going to be next year.
It's totally fair, and it's a conversation we had last year, not just for Dynasty, but also for redraft, about what the future holds for Justin Jefferson. I think the encouraging thing is what he was able to accomplish in the final 4 games that he played without Kirk Cousins, and so he had a great finish with Nick Mullins, from his perspective, at least in week 18. And they may add a rookie, and we'll see. This is a regime that might be aggressive and go up and trade to get, one of the top 3 quarterbacks if they're able to. Could see Kirk Cousins come back as a bridge quarterback, could have a potential, maybe they're aggressive and they get a Jaden Daniels or Drake May. I don't think they're going to get to Caleb Williams, but I think you're still looking at a situation where Jefferson, I think, can play with anybody. And so that's the encouraging thing for me. So I would still take him ahead of Chase, but I have no problem taking Chase. And look, you can make a case for CeeDee Lamb as well, who hasn't been taken also.
He is as close as he's ever been to those two in my dynasty rankings, Dan. I think Mr. NFC East It was obviously a disappointing weekend for the Cowboys as well. I'm sure that didn't bother you, but I do think if he comes out of the gate like he finished last season, we'll have to have a conversation about where he belongs in that top 3 order.
I think that's perfectly fair. And I think they're in a position where he is actually facing an interesting situation coming up because of his contract. And after a season like this one, I don't see how there's any way he's not going to become the highest paid wide receiver in NFL history. That just seems to be how these things go. And with the Dak contract and with the Micah Parsons contract, it's going to be interesting to see how Dallas juggles all of that. I don't think they're going to be the next team to make that, maybe I would call it early foreshadowing move away from quarterback and trade Dak Prescott, but it wouldn't totally surprise me. And I think that would, to me, crater a little bit of that, at least for me, that enthusiasm to move Lamb all the way up the board.
Well, I think we've hit our first pause in the draft, Jamie. So I was thinking about this morning, just from a real football perspective. We don't talk about that a whole lot, but we've seen Bill Belichick let go, or he's gone. There's talk that Mike McCarthy is going to be gone after 3 straight 12-win seasons. Nick Sirianni is going to be gone a year after going to the Super Bowl. Like, are these teams maybe not gone, but that's the talk. Like, are we going a little bit too far on the fire your head coach? There's some value to continuity, right?
There absolutely is, and based on, what you're hearing from the players, and that necessarily doesn't always carry the most weight, but the reports out of the Dallas locker room, the reports that you heard last night from the Philadelphia players, they don't want to see their coaches necessarily go. And, the flip side of that is maybe that's why they need to go, is because the players are too much, in step with the coaching staff, or vice versa. And maybe that's why things are not, going the way that they hope those things will go. It'd be a little surprising, Philadelphia, to get rid of Sirianni so quickly. And I think you could point to some of the flaws easily and say why he should go. But let's be fair here. I mean, he just lost his 2 coordinators,
right.
and again, is that the reason why his team fell apart? Were those guys propping him up? Because they both had amazing seasons where they ended up in Arizona and Indianapolis, looking at what happened to them. And for Dallas, I mean, it's just, another playoff ouster that's, somewhat surprising, especially given how successful they've been at home. So we'll see. I always think that if it's obvious, you let the guy go. Atlanta had to move on from Arthur Smith, for example. So in these 2 cases, I think the thing that you look at is it's such a good crop of assistants that are available, or candidates that are available. And so while you're starting to see some of the, I think the coaching spots line up. It looks like Ben Johnson probably to Washington at this point. It looks like Bill Belichick could be in Atlanta. Dan Quinn could be in Seattle. And so you start to see, okay, where the jobs are going. But Raheem Morris is still out there. There's probably a guy or 2 that I'm missing. If you have somebody in place, like, okay, I know if I'm Jerry Jones and I know I'm getting Bill Belichick, I'll move on from Mike McCarthy just to see, because it clearly has not gotten me to the place I want to get to. And this guy's got, 6 rings. But to bring in just another assistant, or maybe to promote Dan Quinn, like, I don't know if that's the right move to make.
I'm going to have to make a pick for someone here. It looks like, Dan, I want to take a look at the first round as we just completed it. And it was mostly quarterbacks, but we started off with Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes, Jalen Hurts, then Lamar Jackson, Joe Burrow, CJ Stroud, Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, Christian McCaffrey, and then Justin Herbert, Anthony Richardson, CeeDee Lamb. Jamie mentioned those coordinators leaving the Eagles. Shane Steichen, one of those coordinators, had a pretty great year in his first season in Indianapolis, with Gardner Minshew playing quarterback most of the season. What do you expect from Richardson in year 2? Do we see a little bit of struggles because he didn't get his first full rookie year, so he's still kind of a rookie? And then the other thing I want to ask about is, I see people talking about Michael Pittman as still a buy low in Dynasty because he may have some other level to attain. I don't think next year's probably as good for him if Richardson stays healthy. Do you?
I think you're spot on about that. We saw, even in a small sample size, Richardson be a little bit better for Josh Downs. And as far as what will happen in year 2, I actually think it will work in his favor that he didn't play as many games, because one of the things that happens a lot in the NFL is you see these rookie quarterbacks come out hot, have a really good rookie year. And then all of a sudden it seems like year 2, what happened to these players? Davis Mills, Daniel Jones, there's plenty of examples, some, that ended up not working out in the NFL. So they may not be the best examples to compare to players like Anthony Richardson, if you think that ceiling is super high. But what they tend to say is when defensive coordinators get about 8 or 9 games of tape on a quarterback, they see all the tendencies, they see the things they like to do, they take away some of those concepts, and then it becomes, can this quarterback really, elevate? So I don't think Richardson is in that zone just yet because he didn't have that many starts. And I think think they're going to do a good job building around him this offseason. They already have really revived that offensive line. That's the biggest story to me in Indianapolis this year. It looked like it was crippling in 2022, and the offensive line was trending toward one of the worst in the NFL. And then all of a sudden, in my opinion, due to maybe coaching and development, they've kind of revived that. So because that offensive line is where it's at, and because of my faith in Steichen, I have those high expectations for Richardson year 2 as well.
Jamie, we had 3 quarterbacks taken at the start of round 2: Justin Fields, Kyler Murray, Brock Purdy. I'm not sure those 3 guys could be any different in terms of risk and upside profiles. I think this is the right spot for them in terms of where they rank amongst quarterbacks. Right behind Anthony Richardson works for me. We've not seen Trevor Lawrence go yet. What do you think of these 3 quarterbacks at the start of round 2?
I mean, this is going to be in a super flex league where they start to come off the board. Kyler was a little surprising that he went so soon, but you know what he's capable of when he's on his game in year 2, coming back from an ACL. That's typically when players are at their best, coming off the injury at least. And you got to like what he showed in the small sample size that he played in his new system. But in any event, Fields is such a wild card right now. I mean, you can make a case that he should be a first round pick if he, you know, either stays in Chicago and you love that situation, or if he goes to, you know, let's say in Atlanta, you know, which would be my preferred destination if he does move on. So there's a lot to like about what he could still become and has shown at least. So Purdy is, you know, such a hard guy to, you know, peg for the future, because he's tied to these guys, you know, and Dan sort of talked about this, about the salary situation in Dallas. You know, when they have to pay him, what does that mean for everybody else? You know, McCaffrey, this is probably going to be his last great season coming into 2024. Ayuk, they're gonna have to make a decision on him. But yeah, these guys are all in this range, and I hate Dan for the pick he just made.
Dan,
well, I just got sniped on Lawrence.
Yeah, you took Breece Hall there, and I thought I took Jahmyr Gibbs 3 picks earlier. Bijan Robinson went 2 picks earlier. That's probably a little bit controversial. I think some people, as soon as Arthur Smith was fired, put Bijan right back up as RB1 in this class. How do you feel about these 2 backs? Do you have them both ahead of Breece Hall, and which one do you prefer?
I have Bijan highest. He's the one I still prefer. I'm relying on my evaluation from his tape at Texas, relying on just what he's shown in the passing game this year. I know, obviously, we're talking about 2 good backs in the passing game as well, Breece Hall and Jahmyr Gibbs, but I think Robinson takes it to a little bit of a different level, maybe at the same range of Gibbs, just they do it differently because Robinson's a better route runner, I think. So I just still have high expectations for him as a player. So this is Dynasty. I'm willing to take the hit maybe in year 1 here. He may not be as productive as either of those 2 right away until Atlanta finds him some kind of upgrade at quarterback, but I do have faith, and I like the offensive line coach they got going there too.
Now, we know who is in Atlanta meeting with the owner. It's the guy who has never given us consistent running back production. You thought it was bad when Bijan was sharing with Tyler Algier. Wait until Bill Belichick takes over the Atlanta Falcons. No, I'm sure people will say that. I really have a hard time parsing between these 2. I can't imagine trading either for the other. I'd rather just take the one that goes last generally, but we were kind of in a weird spot where there wasn't a quarterback I loved. I did like, Jamie, your pick. You took Jordan Love a couple of picks after Trevor Lawrence. I actually have Love ahead of Lawrence right now in Dynasty.
I don't think that's a stretch at this point, you know, based on how he's performed, you know, in his season. He's in a better system, at least right now, based on what we've seen from, you know, Lawrence the last 2 years and what Love did this year, and certainly what, you know, the Packers offense has produced the last couple of years under Matt LaFleur. Man, it's going to be fun to watch him grow with those receivers. You know, if those guys can become what they're capable of, you know, Jaden Reed and what he showed, and Christian Watson, you know, what he hopefully can still become, and, you know, just all the things that are still there, you know, with even some of the other pieces, you know, Luke Musgrave and Dontavian Wicks and Romeo Dobbs. I mean, just they have so many ways to beat you. He looks fantastic. You know, it was, you know, not just the playoff game. I think that opened a lot of people's eyes, but, you know, you watched him at the end of the season. He was just an absolute star. And so just coming into his own, I was honestly, you know, with the way that the board was unfolding, I was like, okay, maybe Brock Purdy, maybe Jordan Love, you know, we'll see if Lawrence makes it back, because I did want to go QB. And the fact that Love made it there, you know, made the decision easy for me.
Dan, there were 2 teams that did not take a quarterback in the first 2 rounds. 2 guys that always agree on everything, me and Adam Azer. Adam ended up with Justin Jefferson and Bijan Robinson. I ended up with Jamar Chase and Jahmyr Gibbs. Are we crazy, or is this a viable strategy in a SuperFlex Dynasty startup?
It's not the strategy I would ever use in a SuperFlex Dynasty startup, but I think it's a viable strategy because it's a startup and you can take a different route with this. The only issue I have with it is, for me, it seems like it's harder to compete early without the quarterbacks, unless you have a few veteran ideas in mind, maybe. But and then with running backs, I would rather build it out. So if I have a running back heavy team, I also have quarterbacks so I'm ready to compete now, because I feel like the timeline is just condensed a bit with a running back build. So I don't know. If I'm doing that route, I'm probably going heavy receivers.
We're at a really weird place in terms of the
Jamie,
quarterbacks.
How did you do that to me?
Jamie just took Jonathan. You just had Breece Hall. You don't need Jonathan Taylor. I think we're at
both.
a weird place with the quarterbacks that are left in terms of the dynasty rankings, because you've got Jared Goff, you've got Aaron Rodgers is still there, you've got Kirk Cousins, guys that we think will probably be good next year. We've also got Bryce Young, we've got Tua Tagovailoa. We've got some real question marks that are younger. And then the wild card of all wild cards, since you've already picked, Jamie, Deshaun Watson has not been picked yet. We're in the middle of round 3 of a dynasty startup. He's going to be the starter next year. It's not as if the team's turning to Joe Flacco. Do we just hope that he can stay healthy next year and be better?
I think so. I mean, he was 4-1 as a starter, so clearly they like what he was able to accomplish from a team perspective. And look, he played through the shoulder injury. We know how that story unfolded, that he did come back and, at least gave you one game. So I don't know if anybody's going to question his toughness, but you certainly can question, is he still the type of player that he once was? He didn't necessarily show that in the small sample size that we have, end of 2022, beginning of 2023. But great offensive line, still some very good weapons. You hope that they can continue to build out that offense despite the salary cap constraints that they'll be under because of his contract. But I mean, obviously, when you start to get to the back end of the middle of the QB2 range, I think that's where he sort of comes into play. He's not my favorite guy by any stretch. It's not somebody that I'm going to say I want to target. But, once we get into this range, he starts to become a little bit more prominent before the rookies come into the NFL. Like, he's going to go behind, the Caleb Williams and Drake Mays, those type of guys for sure.
And that's something I should have said. This is a SuperFlex PPR mock draft. We are not drafting 2024 rookies in this draft. So we're drafting as if there would be a separate rookie draft, which, if we talked about this with John Bosch last week, if I was starting a new dynasty league and doing a startup this week, that's exactly how I would do it. And I think the tricky part, and I don't know if you have a preference on this, Dan, is if you do that, how do you handle the rookie draft? What we did with our YOLO draft was we had one order for the startup, and then we just reversed the order for the rookie draft. Another thing I've seen that I really like is that people, especially if you don't have kickers in your league, just use kickers as placeholders. So if you want to draft a kicker in the first round and say, then that's all of a sudden you've got rookie 101. And then you take the next kicker that's taken is rookie 102. And so as part of the startup, you're actually drafting your initial rookie draft positioning.
I think I would much prefer the second version, Heath. I want everyone in the player pool. I want to in Dynasty. It's just too. It's in redraft you can maybe get away with it, in my opinion, and you could be like, all right, it's not the big of an edge. But in Dynasty, it could be a huge edge. Like last year with Bijan, for example, that's an asset where if you're just doing reverse snake at the end of it, it's kind of a massive advantage, in my opinion, than to drafting 12th. So I'd rather do the way you said with the placeholders, and you can actually assess the value of each player.
Yeah, I do. I think it's interesting, specifically in a SuperFlex league, like, because if you're drafting 12th, the guy who drafted 12th in this league never had any chance at Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes, Jalen Hurts, Lamar Jackson, Joe Burrow, CJ Stroud. He had no chance at an elite quarterback. And so that's a pretty big disadvantage, right?
Yeah, that is true.
So I think it's really just decide what your league likes better. I've not heard of a third way that I think is just as good. We're almost at the end of round 2, which seems like
the way that you did it with the YOLO league was a huge advantage for me. The way that it worked out, because I had the second pick in the rookie draft, and that was the Fournette McCaffrey year, and I ended up with McCaffrey second. And that's been obviously the cornerstone of my team for so many years, so right. It could work out, obviously, however it does, for depending on, the guy picking in front of me could have easily taken McCaffrey and I would have been stuck with Fournette, and that would have been okay for a few years, but, not the same. But clearly it all depends on, what you decide beforehand.
Right. Those of you who are watching along here on YouTube, you get to see the draft board. Dan, do you mind kind of, for the people that are not, can you read through the round 2 picks for us? I've got to make a couple more picks for another dynasty manager here.
Yeah, round 2, we started off with Justin Fields. So he's got the Fields-Lamb combo down there, which I like. Then Amon-Ra St. Brown to pair with Richardson. A back-to-back pick of Herbert and Kyler Murray. Brock Purdy came off the board. Jahmyr Gibbs and Bijan Robinson and Breece Hall all in 3 of the next 4 picks. Trevor Lawrence and Jordan Love, a couple of the young quarterbacks still on the board. Then Garrett Wilson and Puka, 2 of easily top-tier wide receivers in Dynasty. Dak Prescott, A.J. Brown to start round 3. Chris Olave, Sam Laporta, the first tight end off the board in Dynasty. I think at this point, everyone's Dynasty tight end 1, I would say. I don't think anyone has too much of a disagreement there. Then Jonathan Taylor, I thought was a crazy value pick in the round 3. To me, he's in the mix with all the 3 I mentioned earlier, Bijan Robinson, Jahmyr Gibbs. He has already been signed to that second contract with Indianapolis. I think he benefits from a rushing quarterback like Richardson, and he's still just 25 years old. I took Tua, quarterback. Desperation started there with Tua, Goff, and Deshaun Watson, in my opinion. Look, I get it. You have to do it. But I don't necessarily know if, like, my thought on Deshaun Watson now versus last year in Dynasty is just totally warped and changed. And I don't know where I'd be comfortable taking him anymore. Bryce Young goes off the board after that. I think that's pretty good value there. Just hoping for the bounce back. And then ETN as a second pick in round 4. I think that was along the lines of Jonathan Taylor's maybe the best pure value pick in this draft.
I actually selected Devon Achane for somebody else right before that. And so, Jamie, when you look at those 2 running backs, Travis Etienne has obviously shown us he can handle the volume a lot better. Achane in his rookie season averaged 7.8 yards per carry, was like 6 carries short of the all-time yards per carry record, which actually is held by an old Dolphins running back, Mercury Morris. So between Achane and Etienne, do you have a strong preference there in Dynasty?
I mean, I probably lean Achane just because of the upside. You know, we don't know what he can become if he is the full-time guy, and that's something I think we'd all like to see happen in 2024. With Raheem Mostert at 32 at that point, he's 31 now. You know, Jeff Wilson being just the guy, and so you know you see some of the flashes clearly of what he did. You know, in that role at the end of the season, the final 2 games of the regular season, he was the lead running back for the Dolphins. So I would lean slightly toward Achane, so I don't think that's the wrong order, but you know, you can certainly flip flop them all, and ETN was awesome. Jacksonville just seems like it's a little bit lost right now in terms of where they're headed, and hopefully things can change with a better play call or better system in 2024.
So I think Adam Azer is now in the position where he's gone 3 rounds without a quarterback. He took DJ Moore in round 4. He just took Tank Dell in round 4 after taking DJ Moore in round 3. So now it's Justin Jefferson, Bijan Robinson, DJ Moore, and Tank Dell. I mean, is the strategy to have Daniel Jones as QB1, Dan?
I hope not. I hope that strategy doesn't apply to anyone in Dynasty or in real NFL football heading into the next season. But I don't know what Adam's going to do at this point at the quarterback position. I think when you do this build and you completely punt on quarterback in SuperFlex Dynasty, I can't tell you I know what the next step is, Heath, because I've never done it. What have you ever been down this route of just having no asset whatsoever at quarterback in SuperFlex?
Well, I think there's still a path for him. Like I said, I mentioned some of the veterans, and I don't know where they're going to go. I still only have 1 quarterback, and I was kind of thinking about that, and I figured a couple of them will come back to me next time. But we've got some guys who are going to start next year who we think are going to be pretty good next year. Aaron Rodgers, Kirk Cousins is going to have a starting job. I don't know who it's going to be with, but he'll be a starter. And if it's with Minnesota, I'd expect he'll be pretty good. Matthew Stafford is still out there. He's going to be a starter. Like, it's possible that Azer gets a chance to draft 2 of those guys and is somewhat competitive this season. It's just not a great long-term strategy. The other thing is, I think it depends on what you're looking at for the rookie draft. And good, I was got Dan to talk long enough to where Dan made that pick. We're not drafting rookies right now. If Adam was going through this draft thinking he was going to have the opportunity to get one of those guys in the rookie draft, that would be a little bit different as well.
Yeah, that's fair. I made a pick that I think was a little bit above consensus there, or a little bit too early, maybe according to consensus. Nico Collins. What are your guys' thoughts on that this early for Nico?
I mean, look, he looks fantastic, you know, and can he continue to do this when Tank Dell's on the field? He showed he certainly can, you know, at times. There's, you know, CJ Stroud just elevated everybody, you know, and I think as he continues to get better, that whole team's going to get better. So it's not a bad pick at all at this point.
Let me ask you this: would you put him or Tank Dell ahead in Dynasty in your rankings?
Dynasty, I would take Tank Dell.
Okay.
I would definitely take Dale. I would definitely take the 2 rookie wide receivers who went right after Nico Collins there,
Okay.
Rashee Rice and Zay Flowers. And Rice is another guy. If he does what he did last week against Buffalo and they win that game, and he's able to do it for 2 or 3 more games, I mean, he's probably like a round 2 pick next year in redraft. He might be a top 12 dynasty wide receiver before the playoffs are over.
It's honestly, his offseason is going to be fascinating because of if they see what he's doing and say, okay, we don't need to go get a wide receiver 1. We don't need to go overspend for, let's say, whoever the guy is on the market, whether it's a Mike Evans or a T Higgins or Michael Pittman, one of these guys. And you certainly can add those and he still can be great. But, his ascension may sort of change their opinion a little bit. Now they have to prepare for life after Travis Kelce. And that doesn't necessarily mean tight end only. It could be, just, retooling the receiving core. But my goodness, it's a nice problem to have if he's continuing to look like this and say, okay, we have our guy and he could, just build off what he's been able to accomplish so far.
Dan, you mentioned Sam Laporta as the clear tight end 1. We just saw my tight end 2 go early here in round 5. It's Trey McBride. We haven't seen Mark Andrews. We haven't seen TJ Hawkinson. We haven't seen Travis Kelce. Is that a mistake? Would you have any of those guys ahead of these 2?
I would personally. So I think I would have Mark Andrews ahead of McBride, but I know I'm against consensus on that one as well. I think with McBride, for me, I'm confident. Hold on. I think I'm about to make this pick, but I'll just wrap this up quick. I'm confident in McBride's ability to be a fantasy contributor the way we expect him to be with Kyler Murray. I'm not as confident if Kyler Murray leaves that team. I believe in the talent. I don't really fully believe in his talent, though. I don't think he's a game-changing type of talent at tight end. I didn't love his tape at Colorado State. First year, I thought that was a good kind of indicator of that. Now, he made some spectacular catches this year with Kyler, but I felt like a lot of it was scheme production, if I'm going to be completely honest. And those are always the types of players that scare me in Dynasty. So this is more of an eye test thing for me, but he's just not a player who I have prioritized for Dynasty.
Well, and that's definitely one of those, like when you talk about the film in college, it's hard to imagine that one of the most prolific tight ends in terms of statistical production in college had bad film.
But he did it. I didn't say he had bad film. I just said it wasn't exciting film. It wasn't much of a post-catch ability, in my opinion. And I still haven't seen at the NFL level a lot of explosiveness post-catch. And I think dominating stats at Colorado State against that competition when the ball's coming to you 170 times a year, like we can look at it and say he earned those targets, or we can look at it and say he was 6'5" going against a lot of small guy safeties and linebackers who can't match up with him, and he was, making targets. I always comped him to like best case Jason Witten, which to me is more of an NFL player than a fantasy player. But, to each his own. If it's just my opinion of him as a talent.
Man,
I was pissed he got taken. I was going to take him here.
Yeah,
hang on it too. I think I'm on the clock here though. So
you've been on the clock. I've had to refresh it a couple of times. You went on a 4-minute rant hating Trey McBride.
I'm not hating Trey McBride.
I'm
defending myself for not having him for the production comment as he's dominating Colorado State.
Well, hey, just know that based on how Dan has commented the last couple of days, there's probably a trade coming in one of our dynasty leagues for Trey McBride.
I've got him in that league. So
hold on, I need to make a pick here.
I think Adam Azer actually has him. I tried to trade Travis Kelce for him. I've fallen a little behind on reading the round results. So let's go through round 3 here while I reset for Dan for the 4th time to make his pick.
No.
And there we go. Dan, you got another minute because I know you need it. So in round 3, we had A.J. Brown, Chris Olave, Sam Laporta, Jonathan Taylor, Tua Tagovailoa, Jalen Waddle, DJ Moore, Jared Goff, Tyreek Hill, Deshaun Watson, Brandon Ayuk, and Devon Achane. And Ayuk's a guy that I'm always too low on, according to consensus, Jamie. And he another high-end wide receiver 2 season this year, right in the prime of his career. Do you think he ever has like a top 5 or top 10 season, or is this the best of Brandon Ayuk?
I think that happens on a different team because I think he's going to be one of the casualties of having to pay Brock Purdy eventually, unless they move on from Deebo Samuel. But most likely he's in San Francisco this year. We'll see what kind of contract extension he gets, if he gets one at all. And they could just decide to play out his rookie deal and then franchise tag him. But in San Francisco, if everything stays the same, and that's again, assuming that he doesn't outlast, George Kittle and Deebo Samuel, I think this is as good as it gets, which is still pretty good. I mean, he's had some fantastic seasons. His rookie year was amazing. This past season was amazing. He showed a lot of upside throughout the course of his career. So it's not bad. Right spot for him, I think. And again, there could be another level that he gets to if he is the alpha on a team. He's just not going to be the alpha right now in the current situation of what San Francisco has.
Dan, Adam is on the clock and also in the YouTube chat saying earlier that he was striving for somewhat competitive. Do you think there's a chance that he just didn't know this was a SuperFlex league for a while?
It's the off season now for Azer, so I wouldn't be totally surprised. And you know what, I got to say something about that, Heath. I feel like I've heard that line so often from Adam after we're 5 to 6 rounds into one of his drafts or his mocks. He's like, no, I'm going for like a semi-competitive build here. It's like, what? Every time he goes for the semi-competitive, commit to one or the other, Adam. You're either building for now or you're building for the future. When you have this semi-competitive approach, it lands you Baker Mayfield in round 5, like he just took in this draft right now.
Jamie was in our playoff challenge group chat saying that he loved Baker Mayfield last night. Jamie, do you think he gets more than a 1-year deal next year? Is he going to be locked up as somebody's starter for multiple years?
I would hope Tampa does the right thing and does not give him a long-term deal, because you want to see him prove it again, especially after what he's been through the last couple of seasons. He had a great year. I mean, just given all the expectations of how low it was and what he was able to achieve, but it feels like Tampa certainly played over their head in a bad division, and so they will be a good defensive team. They certainly have a couple of young pieces in place, but Mike Evans is at the end of his career. Chris Godwin, is he still in his prime, or is he getting to the end of his prime? So I would, for me, if I'm Jason Light and the front office there, I would probably try to make it a 1-year, 2-year type of deal at most, with being able to get out of the second deal, more of like a Geno Smith type of contract, and then see if you can move on if things do go south. But look, they're going to be in the mix to win that division again. I don't think Carolina, despite what Bryce Young may do, is going to all of a sudden make a leap. New Orleans in a similar boat. Atlanta could certainly, take advantage of that division by leaps and bounds. But I don't think it's the right move to commit to Baker long-term at his age and just coming off one good season. He needs to be great consistently for a few years for me to give him that type of deal.
Dan, we see Kyren Williams and Saquon Barkley go back-to-back in round 5 here. I feel both like it's a huge value on Kyren Williams, and also like he's exactly the kind of profile that terrifies me in Dynasty, those late round running backs that just greatly exceeded expectations. But right after him goes Saquon Barkley, another guy who is terrifying to me in Dynasty. Are the Giants going to keep Saquon Barkley around this year?
I think this is finally the year they move on from Saquon Barkley, which ultimately could be a good thing, I guess, for his fantasy value to an extent. But I don't think anyone should underestimate just how much the Giants use Saquon Barkley. I don't know if the next team will use him the same way, about 94% snap share type stuff. Like, he'll come off the field for his next team. He's 27 years old, injury history, ACL, MCL. I'm with you, Heath. That's the type of asset that scares the hell out of me in Dynasty. On the flip side, Kyren Williams, not as much of an injury history, younger player with a coach that's committed to him, to a similar type of snap share as the Barkley types, but, Barkley's going to be a potential free agent. I think there's a big gap there for me, a bigger gap than maybe for most. I thought Kyren was maybe the best pick. I said earlier, maybe it was Taylor, and then I said maybe it was ETN. I would say it's Kyren. I was surprised that Kyren continued to fail, but I guess it comes back to what you were saying before, that, in the Dynasty community, it's a little more, there's a little more reservations when it comes to what you just said, a late round back who makes the rise. Similar to like Pierce last year. I
was going to say, doesn't he have James Robinson type feel, Dameon Pierce type feel, just in terms of what these guys have not profiled to be, what they became in the NFL for one season. I mean, they had Kyren in their building for 2 years, and it took Cam Akers, who we know that they were never really fond of, to falter once again. Now, granted, he was injured in his rookie season, so who knows how much that factors into it, that foot was more of a problem than we know. But it just feels like, can he do it again? Can he be that type of player again? And I hope so. Believe me, I have him in a couple of Dynasty leagues myself. I hope so, but I'm certainly skeptical.
It's fair.
I don't know why Thomas hasn't yelled at me yet, but let's take a short break. And then when we do, we'll get back and read through the round 4 and round 5 picks. Okay, so I did start round 4 off Bryce Young, then Travis Etienne, Devontae Smith, Devontae Adams. So a pair of Devontaes in completely opposite areas of their career. Jordan Addison, Tank Dell, JSN. It's a rookie wide receiver run. Then Tank Dell or Nico Collins interrupts that. More rookie wide receivers. Rashee Rice, Zay Flowers. So what's that? 5 out of 6 picks that were rookie wide receivers there in round 4. T. Higgins and Rashad White in the round. So Dan, you took Nico Collins in the middle of all those rookies. Are there any of those rookies that you prefer over Nico Collins? And how would you kind of order the 2023 rookie wide receivers now?
Oh, how would I order the 2023 rookie wide receivers now? Great question. I think I would prefer Nico at this point to. I'm trying to think if I would prefer him to add. I think I would prefer him to Addison and Dell. Obviously, I said earlier I would have taken him over Dell. JSN's probably the one that's a little trickier for me because I had such a high eval of him coming out. And then Zay Flowers, I took Nico over, which that's one that I might be regretting. Obviously, on my board, I didn't see him. And I wasn't really, and I was kind of locked in on Nico. The reason I like Nico so much, I'll just make the case, is because I think he's better for fantasy and better for staying on the field than maybe Tank Dell. And I think he's had more time to now develop that rapport with Stroud. And then Stroud's the big reason why I'm super interested in taking a wide receiver. That I like to pair in Dynasty my receivers with quarterbacks who are locked in there, both through the rookie contract and a second contract. So I'm getting that. So I think situation-wise, I put him ahead of some of those guys. The only ones would probably be Zay and JSN ahead for me.
Jamie, we've seen all the old quarterbacks here go of late. Kirk Cousins, Aaron Rodgers, Matthew Stafford. I don't know who Azer just took Russell Wilson. We've still not seen Will Levis taken yet. And I think he's going to get a full year at least next year to start. He's obviously got the age. He could, if he proves to be a starting quarterback, could be a starter for the next 10 years. What did you see from him as a rookie, and do you have much hope for him in Dynasty?
You saw flashes. You know, it's so tough when you get quarterbacks in situations like this where the team is so bad around him. I mean, he had an aging DeAndre Hopkins, an aging Derrick Henry, a terrible offensive line, no real second receiver to help him. The tight end situation, I thought, took a step back in what Chego Okonkwo did from the end of his rookie year to second year. And so really in a system that didn't exactly allow him, a chance to flourish. That Atlanta game was so eye-opening in what he can be, throwing the ball down the field and all the plays that they were able to make.
Wait, hold on. Can you push one back? I have the pick I want. I'm sorry.
Come on. I didn't even ask you a question. Jamie's talked the entire time you were on the clock.
I have him.
But in any event, if I was Adam, like with the team that he's built, Will Levis makes so much more sense. Like after Stafford, and you can make a case Rodgers too, like you got to take upside. Russell Wilson has no upside. I don't care where he ends up. He has no upside. Maybe for one more season, like that, you gotta at least take the type of a player who can help you. And I don't think that's the move that Adam made there.
So was that Jaden Reed for you, Dan?
Jaden Reed is the one I wanted, and I got him.
Is he your favorite Packers wide receiver? And how would you separate Reed from Dobbs, from Watson, from Dontavian Wicks? Like, how are you prioritizing these guys?
He's my favorite receiver. I would probably have it Reed, Watson, Dobbs, Wicks in my rankings. And I just think Reed's versatility and the way he wins on his routes makes me most confident that he can be in a league that rewards points, even half or full PPR, the best contributor long-term for me. That's really where I'm at with it. Like Watson, to me, I'm a little bit worried about his injury, like how he'll profile as an injury player moving forward with those hamstrings. And then as far as Dobbs and Wicks go, I feel like they're more complementary players. Dobbs is an interesting prospect for sure, but Reed to me has more upside. That's why I landed on him.
We're seeing a little more of a tight end run here at the end of the round with Pitts and Dalton Kincaid going back to back. I may regret not taking one before now. You look at where the tight ends went, Jamie. You've got Sam Laporta in round 3, and then in round 5, we had Trey McBride, TJ Hawkinson, and Mark Andrews, all 3 taken. Then here at the end of round 6, it's Pitts and Dalton Kincaid. Is there one that stands out there as a great value?
Yeah, I wasn't expecting 2 tight ends to go after me. I was actually planning on taking Kincaid. So you'll have to forgive me a second while I take a look here at what I need. But in any event, this is the type of range we expect to see these guys go. They're all superstars, at least have the potential to be superstars. So great value for, I think, them in terms of Pitts. Can he thrive in a better system? And that's what I think we're all waiting to see is, who's going to be the coach there and hopefully allow him to be the type of player that he's capable of being. but it's been a frustrating 2 seasons. You know, the rookie year was great. Year 2, year 3, you know, very frustrating. Injuries certainly were part of that also. But I think, you know, if he gets to play the right spot, which is, you know, more of a, you know, Sam Laporta type tight end. You know, I saw the PFF rankings gave him a little bit too much credit for his blocking. Like, don't block. I don't want to see Kyle Pitts blocking. I want to see him running routes. I want to see him running tight end routes, not wide receiver routes. So, yeah, this is a good spot to take a chance on.
I just hope that, like, I know Dan right now is laser focused on not picking in the next 32 seconds so I can reset the clock for him. But I hope that he saw what happened there, because I went to Jamie with a question before Jamie was on the clock, and Jamie talked and picked, and then it was your turn, Dan. It was seamless. Nobody even knew that Jamie was on the clock there, taking Terry McLaurin in round 6. Jamie, I'm going to go right back to you because Dan did just make a pick. Let's take a look at your team. From the 4 spots, your quarterbacks, Lamar Jackson and Jordan Love. At running back, you've got Jonathan Taylor and Isaiah Pacheco. And Pacheco was someone who we worried about in that Kyron Williams range of late round draft pick. Yep. I will tell you the difference, and I think the reason he's stuck than the James Robinson, Damian Pierce guys that you mentioned is there was no coaching change. Both the other guys had to deal with new coaches coming in and replacing them. I think as long as Sean McVay sticks around, that might be good news for Kyron Williams. But then at wide receiver, you've got Rashee Rice, DK Metcalf, and Terry McLaurin. You've got to feel pretty good about how this has started.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, the last turn wasn't exactly what I was hoping for because Dan, I was considering Jaden Reed. I was kind of looking at a couple of running backs, Pacheco being the number 1 guy. But I was going to see if Jaden Reed made it there just to get a third receiver, another young guy with what I think is huge upside. I do think he's the best Packers receiver. And then, like I said, I was considering Kincaid. You know, when I looked at, okay, Laporta's behind me, McBride's behind me. Did not anticipate Corey taking 2 tight ends. So smart move by him if he loves the upside of Kyle Pitts because you could play him as a flex. But in any event, to end up with Pacheco. And I like receivers whenever we do these type of startup leagues. Most of them are mocks at this point for me, but I do like taking receivers like Metcalf and McBride, guys that have shown the ability to be superstars. I think people sort of overlook them a little bit. Metcalf, I think, Heath, you can answer this. At one point was a top 3 dynasty receiver for you.
Yep.
You know, before some of his struggles and some of these other guys that have pushed him down the list. So still has that potential. And for me, he's a second receiver, because I think Rice will be the number 1 guy on my roster. And then McBride, look, you're talking about maybe Caleb Williams, maybe Drake May, certainly the potential of being the best quarterback that he's ever played with the idea of a better play caller there, an offensive minded play caller. So, you know, for redraft, he's going to be very exciting. For dynasty, I think he still has a couple more years to be a potential star. And so love the setup for what's coming for the guys in Washington. So, you know, there's a couple of receivers that are still on the board. I don't want to mention their names, but they could also benefit in a big way by a quarterback and coaching change, which is coming for sure.
I just took Geno Smith 1 pick after Adam took Derek Carr. I don't know if there's another guy left who I think is going to be starting football games last year. That's why I took Geno. Hopefully Geno's starting next year. I expect that he will be. But we have really reached the point to where now the quarterbacks are going to be taking are just hopes. Maybe a Kenny Pickett, maybe a Sam Howell, probably not Sam Howell. Maybe a Hendon Hooker gets selected. We're pretty much out of starting quarterbacks in the middle of round 7, Dan.
Yeah, that's how it goes in SuperFlex. You see guys like you just said, like normally you wouldn't take Geno Smith over Calvin Ridley, but you have to based on the fact that there just aren't that many to go around. And I think the interesting thing here is there are few quarterbacks who are still signed under contract, but you don't necessarily know if they're going to be starting next year. Daniel Jones obviously being one of them who could be a starter.
Yeah, he'll start next year.
They might have to if they can't think of anything better solution there. And then obviously, like you have Sam Howell, who was mentioned earlier, is just an interesting prospect in the sense that we all expect Washington to use that pick on a quarterback, especially with a new coach and GM coming in. But it's possible they like what they saw in Howell. It's unlikely, but it's possible. And finally, Travis Kelce comes off the board. I was waiting to see when he was going to come off the board here. This is late.
Well, it is late, except for the fact, there were those whispers that Jason and Travis were going to retire at the end of this year. And we just saw yesterday that Jason retired. And it's not like Travis showed something in the playoff, in his first playoff game, that made you think, oh no, he's back. He's fine. Don't worry about him. What do you have? 3 drops in that game?
Wasn't pretty.
So
yeah, he had some struggles. I mean, how much of that though was weather related? But after the year that he just had, first year under 1,000 yards and lowest fantasy points per game, if you want to judge that in terms of PPR since 2016. He did say he's not planning to retire, but I don't know how much that is. I just don't want to tip my hand before I play a game, as Jason Kelsey probably did the same. So,
right.
Is that something you factor in? I would be surprised if he did retire. I think he's going to come back for another year.
Yeah, and I would say at this point, I would be surprised if he leads the Chiefs in receiving next year. It does seem like not just this last week, but over the course of the second half of the season, Rashee Rice has become the best pass catching option for Patrick Mahomes. And if they don't add a number one, I think they're going to add someone. So Kelsey, definitely someone. It's hard to rank him for dynasty purposes. I believe the last time I updated mine, I had him at tight end 9. He was not the best tight end available on the board when he was taken with that most recent pick for me, but I think I'm probably a little lower on him than most. Dan, let's take a look at your team here. You started off with Joe Burrow. You also got Tua at quarterback. Your running backs are spectacular, Breece Hall and Ken Walker. No wide receivers until round 4 of a dynasty startup, which I know is rare for you.
True.
You end up with Nico Collins, Jaden Reed, and Christian Watson as your top 3 wide receivers. Your quarterbacks and running backs are good.
What about the receivers? Yeah, it's fair. And this is not typically the build I like to have. And I was close on a few picks. Like I've punted tight end, which I don't always do in Dynasty. I like getting young talent there. Like I was close with Kincaid versus Reed. I just felt like in both those spots with Breece Hall and Walker, they were the best players overall on my board value wise, like by a considerable margin. And the next best player in both spots, like for when I was debating Ken Walker, it was Ken Walker or Kyron Williams. And then it was just like, I'm running back or running back. Same thing, I think, during the Breece Hall pick. There was another player I was considering. So I think it was Jonathan Taylor. Yeah. So, I don't love to have these kinds of builds, but when I do make these kinds of builds, I tend to try to win for this year. So I was happy to get Tua in there as a QB2, who I think can help me win now. But I am back on the clock, so I need to focus.
Jamie, we've gotten to the point to where finding most people are getting close to filling their starting lineup out. And you're definitely getting close to the point to where it doesn't feel like there are a lot of starting fantasy options being drafted. Is your process here dictated by what your team looks like so far? If you've got a competitor, then you're drafting those old starters that may only have 1 year left. And if not, you're just throwing darts at youngsters.
Yeah, I think, you got to kind of figure out what your team is. Do you have an opportunity to win now? Do you have an opportunity to win now and still be competitive down the road? Or are you just looking completely down the road? For me, I feel like I'm somewhat in the middle. Like I can win now, but I have some, pieces that will certainly be relevant for the next couple of seasons. So I'm not necessarily opposed to, taking veteran players here that still have plenty of upside. So I'm going to do that right now. Well, no, I'm not going to do that right now because I don't have to. I might need a reset. So sorry. I know who I'm going to take next round, for example.
All right, I'm looking forward to seeing who you take next round. Let's I'll get a quick run through
I'll
here.
say it because everybody's got tight ends after me. So if I'm going to lose another tight end, I'm not going to risk taking another player that I want to take here when I see there's 4 tight ends behind me. So
right,
doesn't make sense. So that kind of threw me off for a second. I'm sorry. So I'll probably shoot for a little bit more upside here if I don't find anybody that has the chance to. So I'll take a flyer here on someone that I think a lot of people still have some optimism for. Hopefully Quentin Johnston. So another young receiver that has the chance to be the number 1 guy on his team, at least certainly in the mix, based on how Keenan Allen's situation may unfold.
All he has to do is learn how to run and catch at the same time. And
yeah,
I think other than that, he has all the other physical tools. Dan, are there any of those, any of the rookies that you were excited about other than Quentin Johnston, who really didn't do much this year, but you're targeting them in the mid to later rounds of startups this year? Like you think year 2 is going to be the year?
I think, this is all contingent on a lot of things happening around them, but I think Jalen Hyatt's one that comes to mind for me. I just like what I saw on tape from him, his ability to separate on the vertical plane, and then his ability to track. He reminded me when I watch him in tape of like a much worse, I want to make that clear, version of what Deshaun Jackson made work at the NFL and the collegiate level at Cal. And I think that works across the board at the NFL. You just have to have an explosive thrower. to get him the football down there. And so we'll see if the Giants can find him that this offseason, but he's someone who comes to mind for sure. And then, this is maybe a little bit further down the board, and there's somebody on my mind that hasn't been drafted yet. So I'd prefer to keep that in just until Jamie makes his pick. I don't know if Jamie's thinking in this direction, but if Jamie doesn't make this pick, it'll probably be my next pick, Heath.
Okay, Dan, I'm gonna ask you a question about round 5 then. Listen to these. Listen to these round 5 names and tell
never
me.
mind. He was just picked earlier by Corey. It was Josh Downs. Damn.
It was Josh Downs. Okay, so in round 5, we had Michael Pittman, his teammate, looks like went early in round 5, the first pick. Then Trey McBride, the pick that Dan hated more than any other in this draft.
No, not true.
Then Drake London, then DK Metcalf, Ken Walker, a couple Seahawks going back to back to Jamie and Dan. We've got TJ Hawkinson, Baker Mayfield. That was Adam Azer's first quarterback, the first of 3 that he took in a row. Then Kyron Williams, then Saquon Barkley, then Mark Andrews. Then we had a couple older quarterbacks, Kirk Cousins and Aaron Rodgers, finished that out. So we see kind of the elite tier of tight ends, McBride, Hawkinson, Andrews, the old tier of quarterbacks with Cousins and Rodgers. What are your takes on round 5 here?
Just made my pick, so I'm just getting that in. George Kittle. I'm still okay with that, even in this range. I think if it was a little earlier, I'd be more scared of that one. So what was the question again? The round 5. Say it again, Heath.
No, that's okay. We'll just I was just saying, like, it's kind of a strange picture with those elite tight ends, the older quarterbacks, and Baker Mayfield. And then I think your favorite pick of the round was Kyron Williams, right?
It was of that round. I'm curious why Kyron fell so much. I guess more of it has to do with just that scared factor, but I think he's definitely a different level than Pierce, even though they were drafted in the same range and some of the other backs that have failed before him in that mold. So yeah, I definitely like that one.
We'll take a short break. I'll try to run through, we'll get through 3 or 4 more rounds here, and then we'll finish things up. Of course, all of this will be on the site, a full breakdown of everybody's team and a round by round breakdown of the draft. Okay, so we're back at Jamie. I will read off round 6 to you. You can tell me what your initial thoughts here, maybe a worst pick or a best pick. George Pickens, Stephon Diggs, James Cook, Matthew Stafford,
Deebo Samuel.
I can't, man. My eyes. I went.
Russell
The bad
Wilson,
thing is,
Isaiah Spears, Jaden Reed, Isaiah Pacheco, Will Levis, Kyle Pitts, and Dalton Kincaid. We had a fun conversation in our last redraft, our first redraft, mock draft of Tyjae Spears and what he can become. Dan's very excited. I'm very excited. I'm curious your thoughts, Heath, on what you think Tyjae Spears can be. Assuming that there is they've mentioned Derrick Henry coming back. Rand Carthon, the GM, talked about that. And we could see, anybody from, let's say, like a Joe Mixon, a Saquon Barkley, anybody that might be available brought in there, if they're chasing money and they decide to pay them. We saw them do that with DeAndre Hopkins. But if he is the lead guy, I'm curious, Heath, like how high you would have him ranked in this format in Dynasty, because, second year player, obviously has some concerns, I think, with his knees still, but man, he showed a lot of great flashes and certainly with a better system around him, can be a pass catching back, maybe can, be a physical enough presence that they'll be comfortable with him in short yards, goal line situations. But he certainly passed the eye test for me. I know for Dan as well. So where does he stack up for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think when you think about it, the gap between him and Devon Achane probably is not completely fair, because I do think he has that type of upside, and we have the same types of questions. Will any team think that either of those guys is a true lead back and regularly give them more than 15 touches? And then can they stay healthy if a team does that? But we had a bunch of guys in that class. Spears is probably the second of them. Keaton Mitchell, who did get hurt this year, probably third, and then Jaleel McLaughlin right there with him. Just extreme efficiency guys that can score you fantasy points in bunches, but also huge questions. I think the comment I had to somebody the other day was it could be Alvin Kamara. I don't remember which one I was talking about. Probably Achane. It could be Alvin Kamara, and it could be CJ Spiller. Like, you get that type of profile, Dan, and we've seen big hits and we've seen big time misses.
Yeah, that's the risk you take with that type of profile. But I think once we get to this stage of the draft, it's obviously a point where we can make those types of risks with less to lose. I was just building up my board, and I just found somebody interesting that once he goes off the board, I don't think he's going to make it back to me. I'm going to be curious to get your takes on that. because you asked about, I think right now some of the focus can be on, and I don't want to tip away too much of what I'm trying to do the rest of this draft, but some of the value you can find in the third year receivers, like, because we're focused a lot on who's going to be out of that group. You asked me earlier, we talked about Josh Downs. There's still some third year receivers
I know who he wants.
who had bad second year twos, but maybe have a better quarterback situation developing that could spark some interest here. But we'll see if I get that player.
Dan, if you want to read through round 7, I'm trying
to traded for him when you had the chance.
I know what you're talking about, Jamie, and you're correct about that. But round 7, we had Keenan Allen come off the board, the first pick around 7. That's more of a win now pick. Cooper Kupp right after it, Josh Jacobs. That's 3 in a row. I like Jamie's pick a lot of Terry McLaurin. One of the reasons I like that is, one, still one of the best route runners in the NFL. You look at the stats, you look at some of the stuff and the work that Matt Harmon does. He's still charting really high, McLaurin, but quarterback situation wasn't great for him this year. What happens next year? I mean, the Washington Commanders have the 2nd overall pick. They might, to me, they're the most likely team to move up for 1 and get Caleb Williams in there. So that changed a lot. Christian Watson comes off the board after. Christian Kirk, I like the pick after that. He's tied to Trevor Lawrence if we assume Lawrence will step forward. And then some desperation picks at quarterback, Derek Carr and Geno Smith. That was a 3 in a row from Adam there. Baker Mayfield, Russell Wilson, and Derek Carr. It's a rough way to go about, I think, in the SuperFlex League. We'll see. Calvin Ridley comes off the board after that, and the draft board just went away for a second. So yeah, Mike Evans, Travis Kelce finally comes off the board at the end of round 7. And then I really like the pick of Zach Charbonnet there to round out round 7. Obviously, it's Ken Walker ahead of him, but I saw enough on tape, not only at UCLA, but in his first year, to get me excited about just having him as an asset.
Yeah, Jamie, you had mentioned Tyjae Spears and this idea that, I mean, the difference obviously between Charbonnet and Spears is that Ken Walker is still going to be in Seattle next year. But in a vacuum, I think I prefer Charbonnet's skill set and body more in terms of an NFL running back. So how would you weigh those two things when valuing those two guys in Dynasty?
Drafting today, I think you lean toward what Spears' role could be as opposed to what Charbonnet's role could be. Now, granted, we have a whole new thing coming in Seattle that we have not seen in years, and that's Pete Carroll gone. And so will the new coach / coordinator decide to, go away from really just leaning on one guy and maybe incorporate more 2 backs? And I don't just mean like, using Charbonnet in some hurry up situations, like actually rotating series and maybe making a little bit more of a timeshare. Because we didn't see that a lot when Walker was healthy. It really was Charbonnet's role when Walker wasn't there. But when Walker was there, it was, okay, pass catching situations and really not throwing to him as much, but pass catching situations we saw. But if we get to a situation where both guys are sharing, I'd rather have the upside of Charbonnet because I think he's, as a talent, is a better talent.
All right, Dan, you did a great job reading through round 7. So I'm going to ask you to go through round 8 in the same type of way. I'm going to make one more pick. We'll each kind of go through our teams, and the other 2 guys can grade each person's team through the first 8 or 9 picks of the draft.
Yeah, so we'll start off round 8, with Javonte Williams. Dynasty stocks really changed in the last year, I would say. He went from 2 years ago, drafting him in the first round, in some people's ranks the top 10, had the injury, didn't come back the same way, and now his dynasty value is at an all-time low. I feel like Stevenson, or Mondre, who's taken after him, is another good value pick there. I mean, his dynasty value has cratered in a lot of ways, but he still has the talent in him that we saw force a lot of missed tackles in 2022 if he can get back to that level. Amari Cooper comes off the board. Hold on. Let me just make this one pick. Is my guy still there? No, 1 pick ahead of me, Jahan Dotson. That's why I want a Jahan Dotson.
I think I'll talk about Jahan Dotson while you find somebody to pick. Obviously, Jamie, we were both very excited about Jahan Dotson coming into this season. Now, you mentioned it with McLaurin. It's probably going to be a new rookie quarterback. It's going to be a new offensive system. Curtis Samuel is a free agent, so he's probably going to be gone. Is this the guy that we put, just go ahead right now in July when you write post-hype sleepers, this is the guy that's going to be, or third-year wide receivers, it's going to be in the sitting in the cover?
He'll be there. I still want to see what they do. I thought this was the guy Dan was going to take.
Oh yeah.
So I'm very curious to see how it all unfolds for Dotson. Is it a talent thing? Is it a system thing? I think he'll be one of the better value picks here and in this type of format and definitely in redraft. A guy that you'll take late. But look, he was so talented in his rookie campaign. I hope it's almost like a Brandon Ayuk situation where he just got in the coach's doghouse and couldn't work his way out. And then you saw at least in the case of Ayuk, same coach, but he did all the right things that he had to do to get out of that.
Right.
But in the case of new coach coming in, look, if it is Ben Johnson, and that's the route that they go, man, there's a lot to like about him in that system.
Yeah, I think that the Ben Johnson thing, like we've got all these coaches that or a few of them at least, that were pretty excited about what they would mean, Jim Harbaugh, Ben Johnson, for the offensive players. But Dan, there's almost an equal number that are going to get hired that are not going to be very good for the weapons on their new team, right?
Yeah, that's a great way to look at it. Not every coach that comes in is going to be able to install a system that works for its players. Ben Johnson's one we have high expectations for, but I think there could be misses as well. There's also always going to be some hits that you don't expect. I don't think many people had Bobby Slowick, as being making the impact he made year one with CJ Stroud. So we're going to see some. I think, the focus for me is going to be on who comes from that Shanahan-McVay tree, because that tree is just really hitting right now. And I think a lot of it has to do with how that scheme is set up versus the defenses. A lot of defenses these days are running pattern match coverages, zone coverages in the back end. And I think that system and all the coaches that come for that tree, in my opinion, has the best route combinations to beat those types of coverages. I think we've seen that with CJ Stroud and some of these players, but we'll see what happens there. I am 12 seconds left. I did not do a good job here. I have guys on my queue, though. Give me one quick second. Yeah.
There you go. Jamie, while Dan is taking another 4 minutes to pick.
Yeah, the Chase Brown pick hurt a little bit.
It hurt. I was about to take Chase Brown, but you would have taken him, I guess, before me. So it doesn't matter.
He was queued up.
All right.
I had Daniel Jones in my queue, so that tells you where we're at in terms of quarterback at this point in the draft. Jamie, why don't you run through your team one more time, what you've got through, 11 picks, and then Dan can do the same with his.
So I have 3 quarterbacks: Lamar Jackson, Jordan Love, my first 2 picks. As you mentioned, I just took Daniel Jones with a very heavy Giants run for me with my last 3 picks of former tight end Evan Ingram, Wan'Dale Robinson, and Daniel Jones. Right behind Dan, must be rubbing off of me. But anyway, my quarterbacks are Jackson, Love, and Daniel Jones. My running backs, only 2 right now: Jonathan Taylor and Isaiah Pacheco. My receiving core is Rashee Rice, DK Metcalf, Terry McLaurin, Quentin Johnston, and Wan'Dale Robinson. And again, Evan Ingram is my tight end.
What do you think Ingram has? One more year left of starter production, or maybe just as long as Doug Peterson stays in Jacksonville?
I'll tell you what he was able to do when Christian Kirk went down was so encouraging, knowing that they may move on from Calvin Ridley, because if they sign him, it's a very big compensation in return that they have to give, a 2nd-round pick, which I don't think they want to do based on what Ridley did. So they might work around that by tagging him, and we'll see how that all unfolds. But when there was somebody missing, we saw it 2 years ago. He was great. We saw it this past season at the end of the year. It wasn't the same thing in the beginning of the season when everybody was healthy, but I think he still profiles. 29 years old, has top 10 upside. Once we got past the tight ends, like I'm looking at the guys who went after him, and I debated Kittle. Kittle's only a year older,
right?
But I think there's a little bit higher ceiling for Ingram if, in fact, there is somebody gone. I like him better than Jake Ferguson. I like him better than Michael Mayer and Dallas Goedert. So for me, that was the right time to go get him. Like I said, I regret not getting Dalton Kincaid. So I took Pacheco, and then Pitts and Kincaid went after him. So if I got the chance to do that over again, I probably would have taken Kincaid there and then figured out my second running back after that.
Have we seen Dallas Goedert go?
Yes, he is for the blind Heath Cummings. He went to Josh Walker in round 10.
You know what the amazing thing was? I went to the eye doctor yesterday to get my eye exam, first one in 25 years, because I've just never had any eye concerns. Perfect vision. No concerns whatsoever. You're wrong. Dan, why don't you run through your team for us?
Wow, that was bad evaluation by the eye doctor. I mean, to be fair,
it's like you watching Trey McBride tape.
Yeah. Go ahead. Go watch Colorado State versus the School of Texas Mines, the Colorado School of Mines. Tell me, watch him dominate 210-pound linebacker. But back to my team, Joe Burrow to a tag. So I'm going with the pocket passers heavy early, winning now in that sense, or at least with Tua. Breece Hall and Ken Walker to headline my running backs. Wide receiver is going to be a bit of an uphill sled for me. I got Nico Collins, who I like, tied to CJ Stroud, Jaden Reed, and Christian Watson there. Chris Godwin, Jerry Jeudy. So some post hype there. And then a win now pick with George Kittle. I just didn't really, I don't necessarily believe as much I would say long term, I guess, in Mayer or Ferguson. I'd rather take the early hit here with Kittle. And then Jerome Ford, just to add a third running back there. Like his talent, don't love his situation with Chubb ahead of him, but I also think that that situation could be coming to an end maybe sooner in Cleveland. In general, I'll bet on Ford's speed, winning at the NFL level, and his age, the combination of his speed and age as an asset. So I'm happy with that pick.
We talked about it last week with Dave. Like Nick Chubb, well, I know it's kind of a Mike Evans with Tampa situation. Like he's a Cleveland guy and they would like to keep him there forever.
Yeah.
With his contract situation, he's either taking a pay cut or he's not going to play for the Browns next year. Like his contract is not set up for him to play on his current contract. So we'll see how he recovers from this injury. We'll see. It's not the first time he's done this. He knows how to rehab from an injury. Tell you what, we've gone over an hour for the first time in a long time. Jamie, Dan, thank you guys for being here. Everybody who watched on the chat, thanks for participating and ripping our picks, particularly Adams. We always enjoy that. Remember that you can go to cbssports.com tomorrow, find the results of this draft. Remember to go look for the new 2024 Dynasty landing page, which did just launch last week. You'll find this draft. You'll find this podcast. You'll find all of our rankings and everything else we do Dynasty related linked there on that Dynasty landing page. Bookmark it, check back often, and we will talk to you next Tuesday.